What it do? Welcome in to the Pitch Me Your Thoughts podcast. We're going to be talking World Cup. We're going to be talking soccer, and we're going to take you across the soccer world with insight, interviews, and so much more. I'm J.J. Buck, and I'm so stoked to be taking this journey with a friend and an absolute baller from the OC to the 505 and back. He's a New Mexico legend that started on the pitch with the Lobos, starred with United, and he knows what it takes to play at the highest levels in the United States, and he's going to be sharing that knowledge with you. It is my co-host, Chris Wehan. Dude, what is up? How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I'm honored to be asked to be a part of this with you. When you sent me the text, I was pumped.
Oh, there's no one else I'd want to do this with, man. I appreciate your friendship, your skill, your knowledge, and it's super exciting because it's a World Cup year. It's in the United States, of course, Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. hosting games, and it's going to be a big bump for the sport as a whole, and especially for the U.S. men's national team. And the new format, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of teams that are in the World Cup for the first time in a long time or making their first appearance, but I think it also adds even more pressure because if you're a top 30 team in a 48 team World Cup, where you're going to be looking at a good chunk of third place group finishers advancing to the round of 32 now, it's going to take something dramatic for one of these strong squads to not advance at the group stage.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing when you talk about like the change in the format. You're going to see obviously 8 teams that are in third place move on to the round of 32. I am certain that we'll see someone that will miss out, I'm sure. And I think it's going to be even that much bigger of a deal if a country misses out on the round of 32, just because of how many teams there are that make it. And so that'll be, I think, the most challenging thing. And I think the next thing we'll see that'll be a conversation towards the end is that extra game. What is that going to mean for countries? What is depth going to look like? Now we have to, I think, play 8 games to win this tournament, if I looked at that correctly. But so we'll see maybe some countries that surprise us that can manage that all right, and maybe some countries that fall off maybe in the quarterfinals or round of 16 just based on losing players or not having a deep squad. So it'll be interesting to see what the new format kind of brings us.
Yeah, it does sneak in that extra game. So you got the World Cup beginning June 11th, and it's the round of 32 that's June 28th into the round of 16. And that's what we've been accustomed to is coming out of the group stage, into the round of 16. And I think there's a lot of squads that probably like their starting 11 and a couple players off the bench. And it is going to be interesting as you brought up the depth that's going to be tested from some of these nations, even, the powerhouse nations and the ones that are going to be the favorites. Because, we'll get to it too at the end of the podcast, but we're looking at some of these teams that their still best players are, mid 30s, late 30s, or a Ronaldo at this point.
Yeah. I think it was Ronaldo, Messi, and and Ochoa from Mexico are playing in their 6th World Cup, like unheard of. I remember I wanted Messi to win so bad last time because I thought that was his last run, but he's still playing well. Ronaldo is obviously Mr. Longevity. He's going to go until he's 50. But yeah, it's going to be awesome to see. And I think you touched upon it already, JJ, but part of the new format that excites me is seeing countries that may have never had a chance to make it to a World Cup that got a chance this time. Like Haiti comes to mind. Actually, a couple players that I've played with that are currently in the USL are on that squad. And so it's awesome to see stories like that, and maybe players that would have never thought that they would have had a chance to play in a World Cup are all of a sudden on the world's biggest stage and getting a chance. So it's fun. And I know the other thing to your point that's interesting with the format is the less run up to the World Cup. These teams used to have a lot longer camps, camps that would honestly be the deciding factor to cut numbers down. And now I think it's a 39-day tournament. And so that run up is a lot shorter, and it'll be maybe teams thrive under that shorter window to gel or get the group together. And some teams might struggle with that as well.
Yeah, we just watched the UCL championship last weekend, and a lot of those players, of course, are going to be with their national teams. And so it kind of highlights where we're at with the World Cup upon us. And, going into this one, we watch United States and Senegal. They have one more friendly against Germany, so we can react to what we saw against Senegal. But you look at, Pochettino, he took over back in September 2024, and it's a lot when we talk about U.S. soccer and the federation top to bottom. And now it's not time to point fingers. It's not time to say what if, what needs to be different. This is the team, and this is who they are. So, what have you seen just out of Pochettino with what he's been able to do, since he took over to the team he has right now?
Yeah, he's definitely been an interesting. I think initially when he was hired, it was a lot of excitement. It kind of felt like we finally got a big name coach to come to the federation to lead our national team. But then I think now we've almost seen like, oh, things are so different because, there was the issue, a year ago where a number of players didn't go into camp because they were coming off of long club seasons. Christian Pulisic was the headliner of that decided not to come into camp. And there was a bit of tension with Pochettino and his staff, and some issues in the media, and then players that were left off of this year's squad, and the manner in which they were left off of. Um, you know, I I thought a lot about that, and it's just a different style. He's just just comes with a different mentality, and but I think it's going to benefit us because he's demanding something from the players that I don't think has been demanded of before with American coaches,
Is that
and
kind of just that Euro manager style where he's looking at it as the expectations of he was, running a club in Europe and
yeah,
bringing that to the men's national team?
exactly, exactly. That's a great point, and he just there's no one size fits all. Every coach has their different style, and his style, I think you can argue like it's not the right way, but I think he's going to bring something out of this group, hopefully at the pinnacle moment that we haven't seen before from a national team. And I think that's just getting the players to fight and be committed to being the best version that we can be on the field. And he's gotten results against. I think I saw a stat the other day. He's had some good wins over top 30 countries since he's been the national team head coach. But we've also had some flat results. The Belgium result was poor. So there's always that concern. Are we going to be flat when we're going to have to face one of these bigger nations at some point?
Yeah, look at the team that he's bringing into Group D, so it's United States, Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey. And I was excited with that first half against Senegal. I think you see when you look at the roster initially, there's a giant question mark, and you being a midfielder, is there a little hole in your heart when you look at this roster? The midfield feels a little bit empty, but right off the bat, you could see probably what he wants to do. Man, he wants to get that speed wide with Dest and Pulisic, get those crosses in, and we saw it excel early. But then that just brings up questions about definitely that defensive holding midfielder and back three if Chris Richards is healthy.
Yeah, I think certainly the Chris Richards one hurt when that news came out. Hopefully he gets healthy. I think he will play a role in this World Cup. But I mean, Freeman looked great. I thought he's athletic. Tim Ream. Hopefully, I think the way he wants to set up with the back three, I think that's why the midfield was probably lacking because we saw Des playing such a higher role this weekend. Robinson will get higher, but I think what we saw this last weekend was just different ideas, and he's not married to a style. So I think we'll be able to adjust, and we have the good thing is that starting lineup. I don't know if you felt this way, JJ, but they looked good together and you still felt like, oh, we have game changers on the bench, which I think is unique for the U.S. at this time.
Especially with the attackers, and you look at what you're going to get with Balongun, Pepe, and Haji Wright, and it really feels like they're going to get opportunities, and they're going to need to win in the air or be quick with their decision making because you look at Dest how high he was playing up the pitch, and he's going to have a lot of touches. He's going to open things up. Pulisic as well on the other side. And what do you think that does with the midfield in terms of, we look at Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, and then I think the polarizing picks, of course, it's Sebastian Bullholter and Christian Roldan. As what are they going to be asked to do in this style?
Look, I think there's a reality of being a U.S. men's national team head coach, and this fact that I think that there's pressures put on the coach in the background, such as we have to bring guys from our country's professional league.
Yeah.
And not to say that Christian Roldan and Sebastian Berhalter don't deserve it. I think they're phenomenal players. But I think that is a lot to do with those decisions, because you could argue for players that weren't selected. That being said, I think, obviously I know Tyler Adams is going to be a mainstay in the midfield, Weston McKennie, and then I think Berhalter, he's going to be a utility guy. Same with Roldan. I don't know exactly the role that those two will play, but if I had to guess, they probably won't be in the starting 11. What does that come June 12th? So I don't know the exact role that those two will play, but I know, what we do have is a couple guys that are going to work their ass off no matter what. Sebastian Berhalter and Christian Roldan. The thing that I do like about Berhalter is he gives us a threat from deep in midfield. He's scored with the national team and with his club team goals from deep range. And, those are the type of goals that you could see, like winning a game 1-0. A ball pops out in midfield and he has a go from 25 yards out that gets a winner. And I think that's something that he brings that we can see maybe late in games from this national team.
Who's maybe someone that you're excited to see on this roster? Because when I look at it, and it's names that we know that have got the experience last World Cup, and it's still a young roster. When you look at the United States, was one of the youngest teams in the last World Cup. But when you look at maybe a Tillman or Zendejas, someone like that you're excited to see what they can do.
The player I'm most excited to see, I've always been a fan of his, and I think he looked great against Senegal as well, is Ricardo Pepi. I think he's always been that player that's been on the bubble of the argument. Like, is he in? Is he out? Is he in? Is he out? And I think that's kind of given him a chip on his shoulder to go and really prove himself at the national team level. Whether he's going to be the starting 9 when we line up for the first game, I don't know. But I mean, 19 goals for club this year. Those are great numbers. I think he's the one I'm most excited about, but I think I'm excited about our strikers. I don't know if we've had 3 strikers this good going into a World Cup before. Obviously Ballignon, Florian, he's got 19 goals as well. And Haji Wright, another incredible club season, leading Coventry back to the Premier League. So I don't know if we've had like a level of where any of those guys we're going to be excited about when they're in the starting lineup, and we're going to be excited about when they're coming off the bench. They all bring a little bit something different, but I just think Pepe's just so clever in his movement. I don't know if you noticed the first goal that we scored with, or second goal that Pulisic scored. His movement to come into the space and then go behind the defender was just so clever for me. Those little things are they're hard to understand at times, and they don't go noticed as much. But like, those little things are going to give us an incredible look in the attack, and I'm excited to see him.
Now, that's one of the things
What
I'm
about you,
excited
JJ? Who are
to.
you most excited about?
Well, the attackers you bring up, I think, a really good point. I'm really interested to see the back 3 and how they function with essentially wingback system, right? With saw how far Dest was pushing up the pitch, and then the fact he went so heavy, bringing in Joe Scally, and people thought, oh, maybe he'll just bring another midfielder. No, he went with guys I think can close out games in different ways. Whether they need goals, you mentioned it, they could bring in another striker, and they could go with Zendejas, someone like that. But I also think that they looked at it and said, hey, if we're in the lead, how are we going to see out this game? Do we go to a back four? Do we do something different like that? So I'm intrigued about the amount of defenders that were listed, but the versatility that I think he's going to get out of the three center backs with the wing backs, but then maybe even go to a back four or something along those lines to close out games if they have a lead.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we do, I think to your point as well, like we have strong center backs this camp. Like obviously I know Tim Ream people will argue he's beyond his time, but Austin Trusty, Robinson, I know Tillman can move back. He's obviously more of a midfielder, but then McKenzie, Freeman, I think it's like you said, it's a strong group of defenders that I'm sure that I think you could move Freeman to an outside back and a back five if you're trying to hold on to a lead late in the game. So I think there is the flexibility, and I'm sure Pochettino and his staff have thought through every possible scenario when it comes to game type scenarios.
Before we move on to kind of looking at the group as a whole, what are your thoughts about goalkeeping? What we're going to see the final line of defense for this roster?
That's probably the area of the field I have the least amount of confidence in. And maybe I'm just naive to the fact that for so long that was like our strongest position. I felt like, you had Tim Howard. I felt like for a long time our best players are the players that were in Europe were the best players, and those were often the goalkeepers. I don't know what's going to happen. I actually was fortunate enough to meet the head of goalkeeping for U.S. Soccer this last year. I believe his first name is Jack. He was with Liverpool for a long time. Now he's U.S. Soccer's head of goalkeeping, and I've seen him training the goalkeepers. And I think he's someone that nobody knows about, but he's got incredible experience working with Allison at Liverpool under Klopp for many years. And so I know that he was probably had a lot to do with the decision making. And so I think in that regard, I trust the decision that they felt like these three were the best. I don't know. I don't know what we'll see. I would imagine that Turner is our number one, but we could be surprised. I think there's just as much of an argument for Matt Freese. I can't imagine that that Brady is he's got to be the three. I assume Chris Brady, but who knows? We'll see.
And one thing that was definitely interesting, diving into this World Cup and looking at all the teams in the different groups is there's very few teams I think can play their style every game. And it is going to be a lot of matchup based lineups or tactics versus who you're playing. And you look at this group for the United States, and the assumption is, oh, U.S. is going to get out of this group. It's a home soil. They got this. But it's going to be tough because, Turkey has some legit talent on their roster. Paraguay is just going to be one of those gritty, grindy styles. And then Australia, if somehow, some way they score on you, they're going to park the bus for the rest of the game and be really hard to score on. But still, again, when we're talking about the 48 team tournament, the United States should definitely advance out of this group. But your initial reaction when you saw who they were matched up against and then the expectations you now have for this team with the group in front of them?
Yeah, I think my mentality is similar to like every World Cup. You got to be hopeful that this group finishes one or two. I think you made a great point. I think Paraguay, they're going to be just any South American team. Yeah. They just play differently. They're just gritty. They're just tough. Like
CONCACAF mentality.
Yeah, like even that much, like a little bit higher than the CONCACAF mentality. Like they just they just get stuck in. They're not afraid of a challenge. They kick you, and it's like I think we do have the players like Tyler Adams, that can give it back and manage that. But it's those games you're always worried about your attacking players just getting beat down, like the Christian Pulisic, if he's getting beyond defenders and just taking foul after foul, like those games become very hard for him. But I very much like our chances to win this group. I think that should be the expectation going in. Obviously Turkey's probably going to be our toughest opponent. And in Australia, they've always managed to like hang around in World Cups. They're kind of a country you never really hear anything about until you're in the World Cup, and then they're like just gritty and like tying games 0-0 or like winning games 1-0. They advanced to the round of 16 last World Cup. So yeah, it's going to be a manageable group, I think, but it all comes down to, in my opinion, it comes down to exactly what we saw against Senegal. Can we get on the board early against these teams? Can we kind of establish our tone? I felt like against Senegal, it was like, okay, we established our tone, our style of play on the opponent, and we got a goal for it. And I think if we can do that in each of these games, I think we'll be successful.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge for this team. The momentum, the energy, playing in the United States and the stadiums. If United States scores early, then they're going to get the fans on their side. Like this is going to be one where you're going to be watching a lot of these games and go, wait, this country has this many fans at the stadium? Like, yes, they do. It's a World Cup. But if the United States gets on the board early, I think that's when the U.S. fans can take over and give you that energy and give you that spark that, Mexico's looking for at home. Canada, the same thing, hosting matches there because you mentioned, Australia and Paraguay are styles that can grind you down. And I'm looking at Turkey, man, and I just keep looking at that roster. You got, Real Madrid's number 10 is there. You got a ton of experience, and I'm going to need to get out my pronunciation guide definitely as we go through these rosters. But Kalangu, is one of those midfielders that's played at the highest level forever. When you start looking at teams that could be sneaky, I think Turkey is one of those teams. They have a lot of experienced players that play at a high level across the world, and a style where they're gonna be quick on the counter attack, but a team I think people will overlook if they just don't quite know where some of these guys are playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you. To be honest, I don't know like a ton of their roster, but they've always had a good team, and I think they're very much obviously a European team. I think any country that comes out of Europe is has to be respected. There has to be a level of respect, and just like the U.S. now, I think they're a country that's producing players to the best teams in the world. Inter Milan, Juventus, Real Madrid, Manchester United. So it's they I always just feel like when you have players that come from those teams, they're not afraid of the moment. The moment's not as big for them because that moment in those teams are so big. And same with us. I think this is why this is like definitely a pinnacle World Cup for us because our young players, I still consider them young. They are like Christian Pulisic and Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, but they've been in Europe for a long time now. They've been in Champions League games. They've won trophies. And so I hope and I believe that this moment won't be too big for them, especially the fact that it's on home soil and there's going to be a lot of pressure.
Yeah, United States playing at home in this group. I'm with you, man. I think they have to take the group, put yourselves in the best position possible. When around of 32 matchups come out, and I think Turkey's going to be second. And it's going to be when you play, Paraguay and Australia. Those have to be wins. Those are the games you have to win in this group.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. When my mind thinks about it, it's just such a. I can already get the feeling that I'm going to have when I'm watching this first game against Paraguay, where I'm just going to be on the edge of my seat. It's because every game in the World Cup, I feel like, is a must win. You can't come out of the first game with a loss and be like, that every game is just going to be so critical to set yourself up, and and I think we probably feel that way because it's once every 4 years. It's not like we'll get them next season. It's no. We don't want to wait 4 years, and we don't want to miss this opportunity. And you make a great point, JJ. I think we go out and we win this group, I can just anticipate what the feeling is going to be like around this country, right? And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's going to really fuel this team.
So that Friday, the 12th, USA, Paraguay, Los Angeles. That's game one for the U.S. men's national team. And it's going to be so much fun to watch it overall. And you talk about Canada and what they're going to be, doing hosting games as well. And this could actually be a big bounce back for Mexico on the global stage because they've gotten back to handling their work when it comes with the Gold Cup or nations, anything like that. Like Mexico's getting it done now. And El Tri in Group A with South Africa, South Korea, and Czechia, and they're one of our biggest rivals. So you always got to dabble in Mexico. But I think this is the time where we see them bounce back, especially in a big way on the World Cup stage.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wonder if they feel just as much pressure, probably, if not more. I think their fans are a lot more cutthroat than we are, and they've been under it in terms of pressure and results over the last 4 years, I would say. Um, yeah, but I think they're kind of, I don't know if, would you consider them a dark horse in this tournament?
I would, and it
Yeah.
transitions right into talking about some of the favorites. If you look at the betting lines going to the World Cup, Spain is the outright favorite right now. They have the best odds to win the World Cup, followed by France, England, Brazil, and Argentina. And then right behind them, Portugal, Germany, Netherlands, and Belgium are the betting favorites. And look at Spain and that squad that won the Euros. Yamal, it looks like he is going to be a go for the start of the World Cup, and there was a little bit of a question. And you look at these teams, they're locked in. They have their style. They have their superstars. What do you think it's going to take for France to get back? Of course, they lost to Argentina in penalties last World Cup. Mbappe is kind of the face of their program, but they have been so consistent at the World Cup stage. Of those favorites, Spain, France, England, Brazil, Argentina, who are you leaning to?
I'm leaning towards Spain and Argentina. I think Argentina, to me, to be honest, they come into this World Cup a little bit with a target almost off their back. I think it's almost like we got Messi over the hump. Like, let's go and do it again. We just did it. And it's a lot of the same players and a lot of, I think, the same culture that they'll bring into this World Cup. I don't know if the documentary that came out after them winning the World Cup just felt like the culture was so unique in that group. And so I think that's something that they do very well. And certainly Spain, obviously, they have the most talent across the board, and just such a unique style, keeping possession of the ball, and now to have, I know Yamal will be healthy. He'll play a significant role in this World Cup. Certainly, I think probably the most anticipated superstar that everyone's looking at this World Cup to see, kind of what he does on the world stage. He's obviously already been with Spain many times, but now I think in this environment where, okay, now we're not sort of we are expecting things of him. Maybe before it was kind of let's see how he does, but we certainly are expecting a lot from Yamal. I think France, it comes down to Mbappe. Is he going to carry them again? Which he has. Last World Cup certainly carried them, and I think he is in a unique place. I would say in his career. Obviously, things haven't gone too well for him in Madrid. He leaves PSG. They go on and win 2 Champions Leagues in a row. The Madrid fans are not happy with him, and so either this is like a bit of a fresh start for him almost, or that pressure kind of wears at him. Will be interesting to see. But I think really it comes down to what kind of tournament he has for in terms of how France does. What about you, JJ? What's your who's your favorite to win?
No, even though they're the betting favorite, I think Spain probably has the best midfield overall in this tournament. Coming in healthy, focused, locked in, and I could see Spain and France because this with Mbappe, and then the way that France sets up so organized. They have the experience plus some of the youth that's coming in. That's gonna be really good. And I'm interested in. No, I'm always kind of waiting for whether it's like the Netherlands or Belgium. Like, are they going to get to the semifinals? Is one of those nations going to finally put it all together? Whether look at a KDB and Romeo Lukaku, like guys that have been there, done that for a while, and if they take maybe a little bit less of a role for Belgium, can they get going, or the Netherlands? Virgil van Dijk and just all these established names. Like when I'm thinking about still teams that are favored but not necessarily in the top five, I kind of look at some of those nations and wonder like, is it going to click? Like, is
Mhm.
one of those teams going to get hot? Because we see them, they have some of the best players in the world, but they haven't necessarily been able to go on one of those extended runs at the World Cup stage.
Yeah. I think the Netherlands, it's amazing to think back like how close they were, right? Against Argentina. And they're certainly a country that always does well in these environments. There's almost like a sense that France, especially, is probably the one that I think of the most. That right now, when it comes to the big stage, they have such a sense of like comfort in that environment. And even when I look back at like the Champions League final, is like PSG was just comfortable in that environment. Arsenal was not comfortable in that environment. And that's going to be an argument for the US too. Like, are we comfortable in the moments where it's so the critical moments of a game when there's 180,000 people, screaming? Can we manage that? And I just think our Netherlands certainly one of those teams that they're just like comfortable being at the world stage.
Yeah, and that's you said they were close, but I look in they Gakpo and being an attacking option wide. Memphis Depay, if he's healthy, the dude scores goals for them all the time. Those are some of the teams I'm looking at that they're not necessarily like a true dark horse, but outside of maybe the top 4 or 5 betting favorites, I'm definitely looking at going on a run. But when you look at two, and we brought it up with Messi and Ronaldo, like these are the global superstars, and this is what I hope people enjoy watching this podcast is Chris, you have that inside information, right? The tactical information that we're going to see, but also for a lot of people, this is the most soccer they're going to watch all year, and they know of Messi, they know of Ronaldo, but then it is going to be Mbappe, it's going to be Yamal, so it's like it's one of those. It is a transition year for the global superstars, face of the game, Ronaldo, Messi, getting a chance to play, and then who's going to step in? To that. Is Mbappe a good enough player that kind of can take over globally? Is it going to be Yamal, one of those players from Spain? Is it going to be a reminder that Neymar is still playing? And he's on Brazil, even though he picked up a bit of a knock. But when you kind of look at it's got to be an end of an era, right? Like we can't be talking about Messi and Ronaldo in 2030 on the pitch.
No. I bet if you ask Ronaldo, we will still be talking about Ronaldo come 2030. But no, it's yeah, it's one of those I feel like it's one of those moments in sports where you're like, "Oh, wow, like who is going to step in? Like, who's going to fill those shoes?" And I think in my short lifespan of watching many different sports, no one steps in and fills their shoes. No one's going to be Messi. Messi's one of one. Ronaldo's one of one. Neymar's one of one. And so, you see Lamine Yamal come up and just be who he is. He's a little bit different, but he similar characteristics to Messi, but he's him. He's his one of one, and it definitely is. It's going to be an exciting time where the torch is being passed from those guys. But at the same time, I can't wait to see those guys still play a role in this World Cup. Messi's my favorite player of all time, and I'm gonna just be cherishing every little moment I get to watch him play on the world stage, because I do assume that it'll be his last. It'll be his last World Cup. But I think obviously Yamal is the one to watch, and Endrick is an interesting one for Brazil. He obviously didn't have an easy go of it with Madrid, but his loan, and he's done well. And then I think obviously the 17-year-old Gilberto Mora from Mexico. Um, he is one, obviously, just how young he is. Will be interesting to see the type of role he plays, and obviously it's a different Mexico side. I think there's not as many superstars within the Mexico side. So, and obviously, like you said, they're a team to watch to see kind of how they bounce back. Those are some of the names I'm going to look forward to.
Well, I'm excited. I can't wait to not just talk with you about the World Cup, but watch all these games as it gets going. June 11th, the United States' first game against Paraguay is June 12th, and we're going to be hitting with you content throughout the entire World Cup. And I'm excited to get this going. We'll pop on, we'll have guests, we'll chop it up and talk soccer and enjoy the game in the United States.
Yes, I can't wait. It's I can't wait to see kind of what this event does for soccer in the U.S. It'll be interesting to see, and maybe that's a topic for next time. Kind of what that momentum might look like.
What will that momentum look like? We will hit that next time. But for Chris Wehan, J.J. Buck, thanks for hanging out with us. Pitch me your thoughts. We'll be back as the World Cup is underway just in a few days. Can't wait. Enjoy it. Thank you.